Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Small cordless cutoff tools, usually 3-inch. There's some good ones these days that are awfully powerful, and there are some that are, well, the opposite of all of that. Today we look at the all-new Makita LXT 3-inch cutoff tool, compare it to the top options out there that you might also consider, including Milwaukee, DeWALT, Ridgid, and Ryobi, and against another of our today's purchases that's more on the budget-friendly side of things, and really that model versus other affordable options as well. This is the Makita XCM01Z that a viewer by the name of Louis sent us because he wanted to see how it does versus the competition. Makita's one-handed die grinder fared pretty well for us, and that model's brushed, so this new brushless introduction, under their classic LXT line no less, not XGT, that's got our attention. It's got forward and reverse like you would expect from the top brands these days, which is nice for not throwing sparks at your face, and its size probably reminds me the most of this DeWALT. The head on the XR is bigger, but the handle and battery slide-on the Makita is larger, making both tools, as they are out of the box with a 5 amp hour battery, measure when dunked into water, in a bag of course, displace 1150 cc's worth of volume, basically the amount of space it takes up as a tool. Another thing they both have in common is they both are the most expensive cordless 3-inch cutoff tools on the market, retailing for $179 a piece. Let's see how the new model looks versus some of the competition. Our first test is under load. The amount of load we find you need to cut through some thin sheet metal at a gingerly pace. So under the load of the dyno, this Makita makes about 16,575 RPM. Pretty close to the DeWALT and the Ryobi, but the Ridgid actually takes this test in cutting speed under normal loads. And we're gonna max out this tool on the dyno, but let's say you don't wanna spend 2 to 3 times as much as you could be paying for a cutoff tool. And we like to show those options when possible, so we also picked up this WORX brand off of Amazon. This was $70 bare, but for 80 bucks you can get a 2 amp hour battery and charger. That seems like a no-brainer. Though the included charger is hyper tough levels of slow, 0.4 amps at 20 volts, listed 12 watts max, that's rough. Sometimes people ask us, what is a 3-inch cutoff tool for? The answer is practically everything around a shop. Die grinders have gotten us used to it, but everything from sheet metal to bolts, even tailpipes. But this DeWALT I used this past weekend for finishing a cut on a quartz countertop, the last little bit up against the tile backsplash that the large circular tile saw wouldn't get next to. I then used it for some chicken wire about an hour later on another project. If you leave a battery on one of these, it will get used. Since these tools don't often perform the best with small batteries, being just a motor with a spindle, they like to bog down when forced. So we also picked up this WORX 4 amp hour battery. Now this one was, about the same price as the tool, 75 bucks, so maybe not the best cost savings route, but we wanted to see what it can do, and a similar sort of battery strategy can also be seen with the Bauer from Harbor Freight. So let's see how it does versus that, and just not to be left out with the battery cool options, we'll also run that Makita with the beans, our custom-made 18-volt Makita pack that we put together with some of the spiciest 21700 cells you can find, and massive thick wiring. Let's see how the WORX stacks up against the Bauer and the others in RPM under load. With the included 2 amp hour battery, the Bauer also using its small battery, the WORX cuts at about 12,900, 13,000 RPM. Better than the 11,400 of the Bauer for sure, but you can tell it's still being dragged down by this altogether not that difficult of a task. When the screws are turned to the WORX tool in kit form, it can make it to 160 watts max before cutting out. Again, better than the Bauer, but that Bauer was only using a 1.5 amp hour battery. Not that it always matters at this end of things, but here's the most comparable batteries between the brands, the 4 amp hour on the WORX, a battery that costs more than the tool does, which is actually the same for the Harbor Freight tool. The WORX tool goes from 13,000 to 14,000 RPM, but the Bauer sees an even larger increase to 14,600. And this is the WORX maxed out. $180 watts, not a lot, but what I found most interesting is just how low you have to turn this thing down to find a load it can sustain, not just reach and then max out and cut out. 150 watts is as high as it can go to keep running, around or under what the Bauer can do. When we're talking speed, max power, the amount of power you can sustain with this tool, they're looking very similar. Alright, let's see what the latest Team Teal can tally to. Here's the Makita with a 5 amp hour battery, equivalent batteries from other brands also on screen. $330 watts, pretty good. Not record breaking, but also, you know, maybe like top 3 cutoff tools out there right now. That's pretty decent. DeWALT went on to make more, but that's due to having more battery options, larger ones mainly. Let's pretend for a minute we're in a world where LXT didn't stop at similarly performing 5 and 6 amp hour 18650 batteries and instead offered the beans. Here's what that looks like. So 17,400 RPM, now up from 16.5K, under load, so it's thirsty enough of a tool to make a difference. Let's max it out and find that ceiling of what this cutoff tool can do. $350 watts, and at this point, it doesn't just shut off, it's blinking and mad at me. So yeah, that's as much as she has on tap. Let's rank these 2 new entries, then I'll give you what we think are the best buys out there right now. All tools get dinged for their size here, being small cutoff tools. The WORX, even with its funky shaped battery, is a smaller overall tool in displacement and gets -90 and -105 points for the 2 and 4 amp hour configurations. The Makita is -113. For speed under a normal light sheet metal type cutting load, the Makita is faster with 16,600 RPM and gets 166 over the WORX's 140. Then we got peak and sustainable power in watts here, 160, 140, 180, 150, and then 330, 300. That's your price difference right here. Besides brushless forward and reverse options, the Makita makes twice the sauce. This totals 340 and 365 points and 683, putting Makita third among cordless, and the WORX, yeah, it's in last. It's basically a slightly more expensive Bauer, though if you are only cutting through steel wire, maybe as a kit it is more affordable, but overall, it's kind of the worst we've seen. The Makita, on the other hand, is a good buy. It's a good tool. We think it's going to last a long time, especially for you 18-volt LXT diehards who the brand has been forgetting about at an increasing rate. For my money, the best buy in all of cutoffs right now is the Ridgid. I know, a bit of a surprise one. Its tiny motor gets in the way a lot less and allows for a deeper cut in some cases as well. The DeWALT can beat it, yes, with larger batteries. With equal normal size batteries, the Ridgid even has an edge over that one and is around $100 these days. $100? That's a no-brainer. The DeWALT also isn't always $179. Often it's around $150 these days. That gets a second recommendation and will just not slow down ever with the right battery. And the Ryobi getting a very honorable mention, sometimes just $80 and still miles ahead of Milwaukee in power until they decide to make an M18 one or update that M12. Appreciate you joining us. We make episodes every week. Click subscribe to see those, and thanks for watching.